Are you drinking coffee? It's 9 o'clock at night, man.
I don't drink alcohol much, so.
There are other beverages.
Welcome to Dead Headspace, now a part of Silver Shamrock's Horrorcast, a podcast network that includes Killing Time with Silver Shamrock and Unburying the Dead, where we exhume classic horror paperbacks for the new generation, which, ironically, tonight's episode, it deals with a guest that we actually are going to be talking about in the upcoming episode 3, airing April 1st, Ronald Kelly's Fair. And we'll get more on that later. You can find this and the other Silver Shamrock shows on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Ghana, YouTube, and all other major platforms. I'm your host, Patrick R. McDonough, joined always by my co-host, Brennan LaFaro. Say hi, Brennan.
Hello, everybody.
And today we're joined for a third time by the man behind Fair, along with many, many other awesome books, Ronald Kelly. Hello, sir.
Howdy.
And you know what? Let's just jump into Fear. We never really talked too much about that really anytime you've been on, so
Right.
why don't you tell us what it's about for potential readers?
Fear is a coming-of-age novel about a young 10-year-old farm boy who has a lot of troubles on his back at home, and a monster comes into the rural county and starts wreaking havoc, and he has to find a way to stop it and maybe find a way to solve some other problems of his. And he goes to um, the most evil county in the world, which is Fear County, to find a little magic to help solve his problems.
So, Ron, when the whole book is based around the whole book is based around Jeb, but, a big selling point is you got the most evil county in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of the jumping off point for creating this novel? Did you want to work like a place like that into fiction?
Yeah, that Fair County was like the first thing that popped in my head when I got the idea then I started building the characters around that because um, I Fear had it had a weird origin. It didn't have a very interesting origin because I just woke up one morning and it was in my head and I started writing it. So it wasn't anything that I had to mull over for a long time. It was one of those where you just sit down with no outline and just start writing. So,
You didn't have an outline at all? Did you have an outline?
well, see, I had to provide an outline to Zebra um, so they could approve it because they wanted to know, from word one to the last word, exactly what the story was and everything. But um, Fear was my seventh novel with Zebra, so I had been working with them for a while, and and I was in the middle of let's see, was it my third? I think it was. No, it was my second multi-book deal with Zebra, and um, we just I wrote the book and then did the outline and sent it to them. They approved it. So.
And for audio listeners, I'm holding up a first edition of Zebra's Fear. The cover, so we're just going to jump into Unburying the Dead. By the time this airs, people will have a week from now till then when it comes out, where we introduce our now new host. Along with me, Brennan and Ken McKinley, is Well-Read Beard, a.k.a. Kevin Witten. He brought up a good point. The cover doesn't... I love the cover. It's a great cover, but it doesn't do the book justice, and he worded perfectly. I never thought of this. What cover would do this story justice?
I don't know. I always kind of pictured maybe a dark wooded area with the three main characters, Jeb, Sam, and Roscoe Ledbetter, walking down like um, a trail with maybe a little light coming down on, you know, just something that's kind of um describes their journey into Fear County. Instead of something. I mean, as far as the zebra cover, I really liked that zebra cover, because a lot of the other covers, I didn't really care for, but yeah, it is. I mean, I would like a cover that, would maybe not be as centered on that one part of fear, like the cocoons in the cave. But another way, I wouldn't want it to be like one of these generic horror covers I see nowadays, where you really can't tell whether it's horror or mainstream or something like that.
The potential one you described is giving me major Wizard of Oz vibes heading down the yellow brick road into Fear
Uh,
County.
Did,
Yeah, to kind of piggyback on Patrick's point, putting words in poor Kevin's mouth. I think his point was more, certainly not that it's not a good cover, but more that it looks like a pulp novel. And he said when I read it, he said this transcends pulp. Now I wonder how you feel about that. Do you feel like Fear fits that pulp genre, or do you feel like it's kind of a little more has that literary bent to it?
I think it's a little bit more than a pulp novel. I the other ones I wrote, definitely, you know, pulp. The thing was, when you begin writing for Zebra, a lot of the writers wasn't seasoned authors, and they would sign up new people all the time, and you pretty much uh, you learned to craft as you wrote, novel by novel, which at the beginning you could see the flaws and see that it's not quite as polished, but by the time I got to Fear, I was almost at the top of my game as far as Zebra, when I worked for Zebra, and this novel just flowed. I mean, um, it wasn't like I had to really put a whole lot of brain work into working out, this and that scene, because it just flowed almost like a movie playing in my head.
how long did it take you to write it?
I believe it took me 6 months to write it. It usually took me about 6 to 8 months to write a novel. The only novel that really um, didn't take me that long was Bloodkin, my vampire novel. It took me 2 months, and that's mainly because I was broke and I needed the money. So
So is that writing it to it being in the editor's hands?
yes, if you could
Oh
call them
wow.
editors, because there wasn't very much editing to it. If I look back at some of the manuscripts and compare them to what's in the Zebra books, there's not a whole lot of editing to it. I mean, they they did minimal editing, and sometimes it shows when you read the book. But I tried to do the best I could, and you people don't, when they read my books, they don't seem to pick and pick at it and say, well, this isn't, you didn't do a very good job at this. So maybe I was doing pretty good back then.
Did anyone else say anything about a Wizard of Oz comparison? I mean, I think of, you got the, what's it? You do have a group of three and a dog. There's one less person, but still, did you ever get that comparison?
No, no, not until just recently. And I believe you're you're the one who picked up on it. Really.
That's crazy. It's been like 27 years.
Well, it's been obscure for almost 27 years too, until just recently. So
I don't understand. It makes me wonder how many other incredible books there are that have flown under so many people's radar.
well, yeah, Zebra was putting out so many books back then that, I mean, they put your book out, they'd be on the book racks for a couple of weeks, maybe a month at the most, and then the bookstores would pull them off the shelf and put the next Zebra releases in for the next month. So it was just it was a fast turnover, and you know if they hadn't put so many copies of your book out, you probably wouldn't have made very many royalties. But I did pretty good on them back then, because uh, they would put them, in the airport terminals and drugstores, grocery stores, and the bookstores, so they were everywhere.
What's there's kind of a rebirth of your career, and I mean we've only known each other for since last year, but it seems like it's starting to really kick off around then. What's that like compared to when you were writing for Zebra in the '90s?
Zebra,
As far as fanfare goes,
there was no fanfare back then.
really?
Well, no, I mean you wrote the books, they came out, you didn't know whether they did well or not. You didn't get any feedback from anybody because you know you didn't have what you have now. You didn't have social media. You didn't have contact with all your fans. I mean, I talk to fans almost daily now, and sell them books directly from myself. And back then, it was just such an isolated process, and you were just after you wrote a book, you were focused on the next book that you was going to write and submit, and you knew you were going to have those sales ahead of you. Yeah, it was totally different. I mean, you had a little contact if you wrote short stories for the small press magazines because you had a little community there. You had fellow writers and and stuff like that. But I mean, there were no conventions back then. I mean, we had the World Horror Convention and maybe a couple smaller ones, but there wasn't like the amount of conventions you have now. So yeah, it was totally different kind of dynamic as far as writers, giving feedback on their writing or meeting their fans or anything like that.
Pretty much jump in.
So if I can take us back to fear real quick, I'm curious how much of yourself you put into Jeb.
Jeb, I mean, yeah, I believe Jeb. There's a lot of Jeb in me, or me and a lot of Jeb, but I wasn't a farm boy. I mean, I wasn't a city boy. I mean, a town boy. I was just kind of in between. But I came from a tobacco farming on both sides of my family, and I knew when I stayed with my grandparents, I did chores and stuff. So I didn't go in blind when I wrote it. I knew what farm life was like and tried to depict it as best I could.
The thing about when people compare small town horrors where your universe as a writer is like isolated in. For me, anyways, it's like you hear Innsmouth with Lovecraft or mainly Derry. Now Castle Rock's brought up a lot, but for me, it's like Derry's like the quintessential creepy town. I think that if more people eventually hear and read this book, that you're going to start hearing that comparison too. I don't know how someone couldn't pick this up because again, going back to Kevin, it's beyond horror. You got like I don't know if you meant to do this, but it seems like there's influences of Mark Twain, Richard Matheson, and a little Ray Bradbury. Obviously yourself and Wizard of Oz. Man, it's a whole mix of stuff that I love, and I'm curious as far as the bits and pieces of different tropes in horror, vampires and witches and so forth. Did you know at all going in that you want to play around with some things and make them into your own, or did they just did you write the pants of your seat and surprise yourself with what you wrote?
Well, yeah, I mean, I got to the I kind of had an idea of how I was going to building the characters and the backstory with Jeb's problems and his encounters with the snake critter and everything. But when I got up to where they were actually going to Fair County, that's when I started brainstorming. I wanted to put every nightmarish episode I could think of. I remember in the fear episode you let me listen to ahead of time. you kept mentioning the vampires in the boxcar.
So creepy.
Actually, that was a short story before Fear was even written. If you get my short story collection, Midnight Grinding, there's a story in there called The Boxcar, and it's pretty much it's the same, vampires in the same boxcar. They just it's about some hobos that camp and come across this boxcar that's all sealed up and everything, and this one young hobo boy kind of befriends one of the vampires, and it kind of takes off from there. But yeah, I mean that's where I got the idea for the boxcar part of it, and I'd say there's a few other places in the book that some of my storytelling from other stories kind of drifted in and set the scenes up.
Is there one or a few things that you would like people that haven't read this yet, what you like them to know going in, or maybe to entice them to invest their time into this book?
Well, I mean, all I wanted to do when I started out writing was just write a good story, just something everybody's going to enjoy, a good coming of age story. I've actually written 3 coming of age stories. One was Hindsight, my first novel about a 7-year-old girl who has psychic powers and uh, discovers a triple murder and who actually committed it. And then I wrote Fear, and then I wrote Hell Hollow later on, and that's a coming of age uh, novel too. So some a lot of people's like read some of my coming of age, like Hell Hollow. Everybody was saying, well, he just ripped off it, but just because a coming of age novel has children in it, 12, 10, 11, 12 years old, doesn't mean that that you know it influenced. I mean, whenever I come up with a coming of age novel, it's just directly out of my head, But when you did say, certain influences, yeah, I guess, I'm sure Ray Bradbury influenced me a great amount because I read a whole lot of Ray Bradbury in my teenage years.
Hmm.
So maybe some of his small town kind of, you know, that easygoing small town prose that he used, that's something that I really admired, and maybe something that inspired me. I'm pretty sure.
So, Ron, you kind of created a mythos in Fear with Fear County. So, I'm wondering what plans do you have going forward to revisit that? I know you've hit it in at least one story that I know of.
Right.
Um, what what do you think about doing more with that?
Well, I'm I've been brainstorming today on the sequel, and I was kind of hesitant about doing a sequel. I thought, it's gonna be hard to do, Fear Justice, to do a sequel and not top it, but at least match it. And last night, it what I needed to do hit me, and I'm excited to get on it. I mean, I know exactly, I've actually written the last chapter. I know it's set in stone, so all I have to do is go back and do the beginning and middle of it. But if you thought Fear was a roller coaster ride of emotions, this one's gonna go completely off the track. So I want to tear up.
Dun-dun.
I want to tear up every time I think of what's going to go on in it. So I'm excited. I'm excited to get to work on it.
That's great news. So when can I have it?
Well, I'm gonna finish. I'm gonna finish doing book 1 of the horror western series, turning in the Thunderstorm, and then after that, I'm gonna devote all my time on doing the sequel to Fear. And sometime in the future, I'd really like to do a collection called Tales of Fear County, like almost have an origin story of how the county got the way it was, and some other short stories that kind of um, it's related to it. There is one more story that's related to fear, and it's the novella of The Seedling. It was in the Thunderstorm hardcover of Fear, and the protagonist, Hot Pappy, uh, who was actually the grandson of the Granny Woman and has been trained to deal with the horrors and the evils of Fear County, is one of the main characters in that. Actually it's almost like a novella. So it may still be on the website. If it's not, I'll have my administrator put it on the website, and everybody can go in there and read that, because it doesn't take place in Fear County, but it's like on the border of Fear County, and a creature from Fear County is involved in it. So that might be something somebody would like to read. And of course, the story in the Seasons Creepings, Beneath the Branches, which that's almost that story is almost a setup for the sequel to Fear. So um, I would say read Fear, read The Seedling, and then read Beneath the Branches before and then you'll be primed to read the sequel when it comes out. And
Ron, was,
I'd say I'll have the sequel done by probably October. And
is it going to be another monster of a book?
I don't know. I guess it really should, because I don't think I could scale it down, too much, and because we're gonna have to have a lot of horrors and episodes and stuff, almost like the first one, because I'm not gonna give away too much, but the places and everything in this sequel is gonna be different. I mean, actually, the protagonists go in at the exact same point, but things aren't the same. Almost like a temporal rift or something, where terrain changes and stuff like that. It's almost gonna explain how Fair County is, and why it's the way it is, and how all these things came to be in this county to make it so evil.
This just came to me. Roll with it if you want, don't if you don't want to. But when you say riffs, are we talking about? My mind went straight to branches or strings of different alternatives to timelines.
Yeah, that could be.
Ooh.
I
So,
have I have this I have this idea of them maybe going in a cave and coming across an old miner who had gotten lost in 1907 or something, and for him it's just been a few days, and I actually, I toyed with the idea of doing a mid-grade series of Fear County stories for middle grade
ooh.
readers, because my son, he wants to read my stuff so badly, and there's stuff in my books, I really don't want him to read, but especially not Essential Six stuff.
You're talking about my 1.5-year-old's reading that.
I say, here, Bubba, here's diary,
Oh no, that's how it starts.
But I thought it would be really cool where these kids, they go to Fair County and they get lost in it for you know a whole series of books, and the like the terrain changes, and they encounter new terrors and stuff like that, and they come across regular people who's lost in there too, and so a lot of the stuff I've thought, I don't know if that'll ever come to be. I know I talked to Kim McKinley about it, and we thought if we could ever get it in Scholastic, picked up by Scholastic, it would probably take off. But that might be a long shot. But we've talked about it, and I don't know if it'll come to be. But I can, some of the things I cooked up for that series is probably going to integrate into the sequel.
I really hope you do that and try to push it with Scholastic, man. I'll buy every damn copy. Brandon and I are kids of R.L. Stine, so I never got into Fear Street. I just didn't know of it when I was growing up. But the Scholastic Book Fair, I got I got beyond excited. And Goosebumps was like my go-to. Man, I'm all amped. I'm juiced up. Brendan, he was
Yeah,
doing this.
I'm gonna throw out there. I love the idea of the rifts, like just because I love the idea that this is not a county filled with bad people. This is an inherently evil county. Like the land itself is evil. And what embodies that better than these characters thinking that they can have one up on this place by treading familiar ground. They already know what they're encountering, and just as soon as they cross that line, any advantage they think they had is out the window. That's perfect, man.
Yeah, I've been reading a lot of cosmic horror lately. I've read a lot of Mary San Giovanni stuff, and I'm in the middle of Haley Piper's The Worm and his
Worm and
Kings.
his Kings, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, maybe some of that'll fit in there. And maybe not obvious, cosmic horror, but I mean, maybe some stuff from different dimensions or stuff like that. It's just since fear lay dormant for years and years, and I didn't think about it and everything, and then it's getting popular again, and it's just kind of opened my imagination, told me and showed me the potential of what might be done with some of the mythos. That I think personally, I think all my books are connected with some sort of mythos, because I can sit down and write a map, and it's almost like a chain of where book to book, through Tennessee mostly. My second book, Pitfall, was totally different. It was in West Texas, so that's not really part of it. But I mean, as far as the Irish werewolves and Undertaker's Moon and Grandpappy Craven and Bloodkin, I think it's all interconnected and stuff like that.
You know what, man? That I love how you focus on your home state. Um, I'm assuming that's your home state.
Yes.
Born, yeah. I've never actually asked or looked. Like King's got Maine, you got there. Again, Lovecraft has Rhode Island. Ever since I moved down to Jersey, I've been writing about South Jersey, Philadelphia too, and it's neat, man. I mean, I love New England stuff. Brennan's got. You know what? I didn't even think of this. I'm gonna plug him. He's got a book coming out. Tell me if I mess up the name. Slattery Falls.
No, you got it. The soft A. Good work.
Nice. I mean, I would not be bringing it up if I didn't mean this, but and I have to say it because I have said it time and time again. He's my closest friend in this community and beyond it. But his New England ghost story is just amazing. I love that. I love New England stories, but there's a lot of them. Probably because of King, Edgar Allan Poe and Lovecraft, amongst many others. But he nails it. I'm getting off track here. I want to talk about Haley Piper real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Was it Brennan? Chapter 14? Is that like the chapter that we were both like, oh my god?
I have 10 stuck in my head, but I don't know if that's accurate.
We can't say what happens, but there's something that happens, and I haven't read it in another story before. So when you finish that book, if you want to talk about it, let's talk about it. By the way, whoever's listening, if you haven't read that book yet, buy it, read it. It's amazing. So, real quick, back to Fear. One more thing. Just a reminder, everybody, check out Unburying the Dead podcast. You can find it on, like I said, everywhere where you can find this show, minus YouTube for now. That will be on YouTube eventually. Me, Brennan, Kev, and Ken were talking about things, and you were kind of in your head saying, here's the answer, because we weren't sure.
Yeah, I was listening to it, and I was talking back to to the audio. Hey, wait a minute. Now, let me tell you about this. But right now I can't for the life of me think of what I was going to say. So
Oh, that's okay. How about you, Brennan? Anything before we move on?
No, but if you're okay with me kind of moving on, I'm just gonna throw out there. Patrick had put out a solicitation earlier, see if anybody had any questions they want to throw out, and we received a couple. So one of them you already answered. It was from Emily Haynes. She asked, "Will a second part of Fear come out?" And it sounds like the answer is yes,
yes,
eventually. Um, but she also wanted to know, and this kind of brings up the topic of you've been, putting reissues out. You have Bloodkin coming out in a couple months.
yeah,
She wanted to know, will there be a reissue of Restless Shadows?
yes. Next year we're going to put out a double volume, two books in one. It's going to be Hindsight and Restless Shadows together, which is Restless Shadows is the sequel to Hindsight. So um, actually, it's a funny. The first book that I did for Zebra, you know, the third multi-book contract, which never was fulfilled because Zebra shut down in 1996. Restless Shadows in Hell Hollow was one of the two Zebra books that were already on the schedule when it happened. I was excited about it because here I was going to have the sequel to Hindsight and everything, and then they pulled the plug and said, here's your books back, and uh, so when I came back in 2006, and Richard Sismar asked me what I wanted to start with, and I said, well, I want to do Hell Hollows, the novel, and we did that in hardcover and the short story collection, and then later on I did. Uh, Thunderstorm did Restless Shadows as a limited edition, and then I put that out in ebook uh, and right now the audio's being done right now, the audio book.
So I think you had more to say, but I rudely talked over you. I mentioned you have Bloodkin coming out in a few months.
Yes.
You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, Bloodkin is that was the last book I did with Zebra. It came out the year that Zebra shut down. Actually, it came out like 2 months after before Zebra shut down, and um, I think it's a very good vampire book. I mean, it's not your average vampire. I mean, it's it came out at a time when vampires are they had a lot of sympathy for the vampires instead of the victims. Anne Rice, the Interview with a Vampire and Lestat and all that, and I just wanted to go back and do an old school vampire and really evil uh, vampire, and I came up with Grandpappy Craven. He's a traveling mountain preacher who was bitten by a vampire, and his wife kills him and buries him without a headstone, and he just he his body, the whereabouts of his body disappears, and then one of his descendants 100 years later accidentally digs him up and is compelled to pull the stake out of his the skeleton's chest, and then Grandpappy's back and he's trying to recruit the whole his all his descendants into like a church of the damned. So um, um, a lot of people think it's as good as Undertaker's Moon or something like that. So this will be the first time that Billy Ken's going to be released in paperback since the Zebra paperback. So um, uh, Alex McVeigh did a really cool cover, with Grandpappy with the it's just the red eyes and dripping fangs and everything I like in a cover is where there's no doubt that it's a horror cover. So
Yeah, Alex is a pretty excellent cover artist. I love the upcoming one that he has for the EC style comic book that we could,
yeah,
well, book. It's a comic book, but we could talk about that at the end when we ask you what are your upcoming projects. So we have at least a few to talk about.
yeah, right.
I like the comparison to with Bloodkin to Undertaker's Moon, because when I read that, it kind of the way you just described Bloodkin, that was kind of my take on that book, where, if you're picking that up thinking, I'm sick of werewolves, it's okay, well, read this. This is different. This is not your traditional werewolf story. We're going in a different direction here, and really all the way back to the source. So actually, Pat, if you're cool with it, you want to go to Undertaker's Moon?
Yeah, that was actually a great segue, because the cover itself looks very. Alex did the cover for Undertaker's Moon, right?
Actually, Alex did that in 2006, and the Thunderstorm book. There was a long, convoluted chain of events that led up to the publication of that. I mean, it started out with a publisher called Nocturne wanted to do it, and they folded, and then Paul Little's Full Moon Press wanted to do it, and he folded, and then finally I got with Paul Goblich, and he wanted to do the essential Ronald Kelly collection, and we did all the Zebra novels. So finally, I think it was 2011 or something, 2012, that we finally did the Undertaker's Moon, and we'd had the werewolf painting for years and years, and Alex saved it for me, and I think it's the best looking werewolf cover. I'm very blessed to have that on the cover of one of my books.
It's totally cool. It's super creepy. I went in and I listened to the audio version, because you know this, but maybe someone that feels, because I felt an immense amount of pressure because of the show to read as much as I could for each upcoming guest, and audiobooks is now my thing. And text-to-speech, it saved me, because I read 3-year books in 1 month. Yeah, I'm saying read in place of listening. It's so much easier to say it that way. But Undertaker's Moon, it starts off with let me say this without spoiling anything. It starts off brutally, and I dug it, and at some point I found myself in love with it, and I found myself at the end. I'm like, this is like one of the greatest werewolf stories I've ever read. Why isn't this a movie? That's the first novel I read by you. The second was Fair. I think the third one's gonna be Hindsight. Really looking towards that. And then I got this one Western that I can't wait to read.
Yeah, that's a naughty Western,
Jake Logan. Yeah, it's got a.
There's like 3 or 4 sex scenes in that. That was a requirement of a Jake Logan, is that you inject, some sex in there, and it actually gave you a Jake Logan Bible that told you what you could put in there and what you couldn't put in there. So, I mean, you couldn't put anything too kinky in there, and it had to almost be straight kind of, sex and stuff like that. But I mean, at the time, I mean, it was a good gig. I mean, it was like 150-page book, and it took you 2 weeks to write, and they paid you a solid $5,000 for it, and that would have been strangely enough, I wrote 2, and then they shut down Jake Logan for a while. Because it took me a while to get established, because Jake Logan was written by 5 ghostwriters, and one of them passed away, and my agent said at the time, do you want to get into this spot? And I don't know why, but I kind of hesitated. I don't know if I want to do that or not. And then I called up Joe Lansdale, and he said, yeah, go for it. I mean, I've ghostwritten. And so I got in there. Maybe I waited a little too long. I got in there and got 2 in there, and then they shut it down. And then they brought it back, and the spots were filled already. So,
I gotta have we could have a round table where it's just like Southern writers, you and Lansdale and a few others. That'd be so cool. Just came to me.
I actually have done at conventions, done panels with Joe and James Newman. And it's a lot of fun. I mean,
oh yeah, I forgot Newman's a Southerner.
Yeah, he's from North Carolina.
Let me ask you something, man, because actually last week I was looking up on online some of his books. This one jumped at me called The Wicked.
Yes,
How, how is that? Because that looks pretty
it's very
freaking
good.
cool.
Yeah, it's brutal. Yeah, it's very good. Most of his books are brutal. I mean, um, I actually his book Animosity. I read it before he even published it. He sent me a copy, and I read. Yeah, he actually autographed the copy for me. I still got it somewhere.
Nice.
But yeah, that you need to read Animosity too, because I mean that's like real life writers getting, you know, where the neighbors have a certain perception of you as a horror writer, and then
Oh,
something something really bad happens in the community, and you're the first one that they look at, you know, and then it escalates from there. You know, it gets so wild and brutal that. But yeah, I suggest that one and Midnight Rain. You need to
I was
read
gonna
that.
bring that up.
That is more of a like a suspense crime novel than it is an actual horror novel. But that was one of the first books I read when I came back. You know, I decided to come back, and actually I'd read it before I decided to come back and write. You know, that was one of the books that was a catalyst for me saying, yeah, I can do this again. You know, so I credit Brian Keene's The Rising and Newman's Midnight Rain for bringing me back, because you know that just kind of renewed my interest in wanting to write again.
All right, more in your break after we cover Undertaker's Moon, if that's okay with you. Um, and yeah, you just made up my mind. I'm gonna get after we talk. I'm gonna buy a copy of The Rise, and I haven't read it yet, so I'll buy a copy of that. Midnight Rain.
Hmm.
Uh, we're having Newman on later this summer for his release with. I don't know if it's a novella or a novel, but this summer, I forget which month, through Silver Shamrock.
Yeah, cool.
Uh, and you know what? Before we even ever talk to Ken, I mean, this guy just keeps on escalating.
I know.
It's amazing. I know some things that he's gonna. I'm not gonna say here, but a little tease for anyone that's like, "Ooh, what is that?" Well, look into Silver Shamrock. But I know some things that he's coming up with, and my mind's boggled. Like he isn't. He's never satisfied with. All right, well, we got this nice thing going on. He's just escalating it more and more to more books, more awesome sign-ins, more cover reveals. Brennan, my specific question for Back to Undertaker's Moon is when we were talking about Fear with Kevin and Ken. I don't know. I didn't know if you got to this part yet, but the Booker brothers from Undertaker's Moon. Don't they remind you about some characters in Fear?
You compared them to the bullies, I believe.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I mean, they were definitely bad dudes, and they were prevalent throughout Undertaker's Moon. So yeah, I definitely had gotten to that part by the time we did the Fear episode. But yeah, they were. Um, and you know what? The way they were used, that's perfect. I was curious about. I'm gonna butcher this, but Arget Bethir, is
Yeah.
that uh is that pulled from Irish mythology, or is that pulled from Kelly mythology?
That was Kelly mythology. I just kind of, I've always just loved, Irish folklore and stuff like that. And I thought, I want to write it. When I wrote, um, actually, the writing, getting the idea for Undertaker's Moons has a funny story to it. It was the summer of 1990. I'd already had Hindsight and Pitfall published. I'd already turned in the first book of the multi-book deal, which was The Darken, which would be something out there. And I was kind of brainstorming what I wanted to do for the fourth book. And I remember that night, it was summer, it was hot, it was muggy. I was inside and I was reading an Irish folklore book. And I thought, I gotta, get a breather. So I think I got me a Dr. Pepper out of the fridge and went out on the front porch and sat down on the front porch. And it was muggy and hot, and it was dark. We didn't have any street lights on that street, so it was dark. And directly about half a mile away directly from my front porch is a really tall wooded hill, and and all of a sudden I heard a howl, but it wasn't like a hunting dog. It wasn't like, I know what a blue tick or a red bone hound dog sounds like. This was a very deep throated, long howl, and it just, I mean, it put a shiver down my spine. I mean, it was hot outside, but I got a chill off that. And so I went inside and I locked the door behind me. Went went back to my sat back down and started reading the Irish folklore, and the wheels started turning a little bit, and then I went to bed and I came back. I woke up the next morning, and I started writing Undertaker's Moon. That seems to be a thing with me. Is sometimes I sleep on just a germ of idea, and then I wake up and a lot of the plot ideas and characters are filled in. I don't know if I dream about it or maybe my mind's just refreshed from sleep and I just the creativity kicks in or something like that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about dreams, and there's so many ways you can go with that, but I don't want to take us away from Undertaker's Moon. Brennan, I'm curious what your overall feeling was on the book, man.
I really liked the small town aspect. I shared with you that it reminded me of not I don't want to say it reminded me of Salem's Lot, but it reminded me of the feeling I got reading Salem's Lot, just this very contained town and this outside force comes from far away and really just upheaves everything.
Mhm.
And I am such a sucker for, small town horror. Um, the town of oh, now I'm going to butcher it. Was it Hickory Falls?
No, it was Old Hickory.
Old Hickory, yeah. The town of Old Hickory just felt so lived in. Just it came off the page, and I think that was kind of one of the strengths of the book. Is just create this real lived in setting, and we're willing to buy pretty much anything that comes in and upsets the town that we already kind of believe in.
Mhm.
So what's your process for creating like a town out of thin air like that?
It comes from towns I've lived in, towns I've lived near. Um, you know, most of the little towns are almost set up the same way. I mean, they have a town square. They have, you know, family-owned businesses along the strips, and you got your churches. Down here you got a lot of churches. So it's the Bible Belt, or it used to be the Bible Belt. I don't know if it's still classified as that now, but there's always that. Then you got your farmland, and you a lot of farmers, and you got a lot of blue collar workers. That I came from a blue collar family, and both my grandfathers um, they they grew tobacco up to a certain point, and one of my grandfathers worked for the state with running a backhoe the rest of his life until he retired. So I mean, I've always been anchored in a blue collar background, farming. So that kind of that kind of sinks into a lot of my stories and stuff like that. But you know, I think you need to lay the foundation for your book. You got to set up the town. You got to set up the characters. That's why I spend so much time on character development. I just you got to make your characters believable, and you got to make it where the reader really cares about them. Or I think I wrote a little post on Facebook the other day that you know almost monsters are secondary as far as suspension of disbelief. You've got to have the characters set up to such a realistic point that, if they believe in the monster, you're going to believe in it too. So, if your characters aren't acting realistically, if they're acting like those goofy teenagers in the slasher movies and getting killed here and there because they're acting so stupidly, then your monster isn't going to come across as being threatening and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean that's a key point. And when I structure a story, I especially Southern horror, have a small town and the characters in the towns, they're going to be the ones who fight the evil that comes into it.
Yeah, you definitely have great skill in developing characters because I was there for it for all the werewolves and ghost trains and so forth. um, I'm glad that you suggested Undertaker's Moon with Irish Gothic because they pair really well together. So before we jump into Irish Gothic, we have a question from Erica Robin. I'd love to know more about how the cover for Irish Gothic was created. It's such an incredible cover from the illustrations and the colors to the fonts. Chef's kiss.
Well, I've been using Zach on my little collections. I've been using Zach McCain to do the covers. He did the Halloween store first, and then he did the Seasons Creepings. I came up with the ideas of what I wanted on the covers. We discussed how we wanted to lay out the artwork and the design and everything, and then he got to work. He's a super artist to work with, and he's fast too because these little collections, I came up with the idea maybe 2 months before they were published, and got it all put together, and he got the covers and Crossroads, they got it edited and sent to Amazon, and we got them out fast, and they did really well. And as far as Irish Gothic, I had this idea of the light and dark of Ireland, the bright sunny Ireland that's the green pastures and the rock walls and everything, and yes, and then the other side of Ireland where it's the graveyards and the dark ghost and cryptids and stuff like that. So I came up with that design with the half and half image, and Zach, he put it together. He did all the intricate, border work and stuff like that, and did the really cool back cover illustration of the skull shamrock, and so yeah, I'm really pleased with the cover, and it's it's getting really good reviews. I mean, I'm getting 4 and 5 stars, So there's some people that want to give me 3 stars, and I'm not going to mention names, am I, Patrick?
They sound petty, so I mean, I wouldn't even pay any mind to them.
Hey, it's no big deal. I'm a big boy, and it wasn't like I dedicated the book to you or anything, So
I know. I'm very man. I sound like an asshole.
That's true. I kind of want to listen to you defend yourself for the next 5 minutes. So
Well, all I was gonna say is I'm comparing it to other books by you. I mean, it's a good book.
Yeah. I was real, I was real hesitant about this book because it took me out of my, comfort zone. I mean, it's not Southern horror. I mean, I thought, am I going to be able to pull this off? Because you got to do different, voice rhythms. Even the narrative rhythm is different because, Ireland has, I mean, if you compare Ireland, the speech and stuff of Ireland to like Britain or Scotland, it's completely different. I mean, even the slang and all that, and I had read a lot of Irish authors and a lot of movies like The Quiet Man. The Quiet Man is my favorite John Wayne movie, and I mean, I got a lot of the, you know, the speech rhythms and stuff like that from that movie, you know, and I've actually, you know, I've heard from fans and stuff who's been to Ireland several times or lived in Ireland, and they seem to think, you know, it's pretty authentic the way I depicted it. So I'm really relieved about that.
That's awesome. And I think I know the answer. It just came to me after we've been talking for the last almost hour. I'm used to your books with character development. It's there, but I
Mm-hmm.
wanted more. Specifically with ones like O'Sheahan. I don't know if I say that right.
Sheehan,
O'Sheahan.
yes.
It's like I got a taste of a piece of pizza, and I love pizza. But give me some more, man. And look, I sound like a jerk the more I explain it, but
Well, you
because
know,
it's your book, so it's whatever the hell you want it to be. But that's my reason for it. And let me be clear, that's my opinion, people. And he did dedicate to me, so I feel like a dick, even though he's very nice.
you know, the funny thing about O'Sheahan is, you know, it was just a little comedy story, dark comedy kind of story, and but you know, I've had more than a dozen reviewers say I want to read more O'Sheahan, you know, and you know, do a novel, do, you know, some stories, and so I may do an O'Sheahan casebook, you know, because you know Shannon worked for Sheehan for 15 years, so there's got to be more cases to be explored and stuff like that, and all that. So yeah, I'm probably going to do some more O'Sheahan before it's over with.
Before we jump into that, because I know me and Brennan, that was our favorite story. I just want to read the dedication because it's really cool. I like what you did with it. It's for me and Brennan. It says to Patrick McDonough and Brennan LaFaro, may your blessings outnumber the shamrocks that grow, and may trouble avoid you wherever you go. May your hearts remain true and gladness pervade, and your bookshelves grow heavy with the worlds you have made. So I think that's a cool. It sounds Irish, and I mean, obviously, it pertains to us because we're writers too. So I like that, Brennan. What were your thoughts on that? Because I've never actually asked you.
It's a dedication, and it sounds like a blessing. It sounds like an Irish blessing. I love it.
That's what I meant it to be. So
Yeah.
So O'Sheahan, I when I read that, it makes me think of a few things like Constantine, Dylan Dog. Who's the other one? Slipping my mind, but you could do a lot with that. So Brennan, why don't you take it away? Because I'm curious what you
One
have
you
to
were
say.
missing wasn't Sherlock Holmes, was it?
yes, that's what I was basing it on, is, you know, Sherlock Holmes, you know, and you know, of course, Sherlock Holmes, you know, he had that fatal fall off the falls with Professor Moriarty, and of course, you know, Sheehan had, you know, I think it was some squire that his evil nemesis, he fell off the cliffs of Moor, you know, into the sea and all that, supposedly, you know, but like Sherlock Holmes did. But you know, I just kind of, you know, took the Sherlock Holmes, you know, lore and stuff and kind of applied it to O'Sheahan, where and O'Sheahan's, you know, this story is almost like O'Sheahan is, you know, come to the point where he's just becoming a policeman and babysitter for all these misbehaving cryptids and stuff that aren't doing what are, you know, aren't doing, you know, Ireland proud and everything, and so, but you know, some of his, you know, if I do the case book, you know, maybe we'll have some more, you know, it's not going to be all dark comedy and everything. Maybe we'll have some, you know, some exciting stories and stuff too.
I'm gonna officially put in a request for a case on Slua. Slua are what I think a really interesting Irish cryptid that a lot of people are not familiar with. I know I wasn't familiar with it before Patrick and I kind of dug in looking at some of the different creatures for a series of books we wrote together, and that was one that really caught my attention. You know, we ended up giving it a pretty central role in our book. I ended up writing another story that kind of takes place. It's, I think, word length wise, probably a novelette that takes place in that world that kind of focuses on them. And I was reading through Ocean and saying, "Oh, there it is, Slua." Yeah, somebody else knows what that is. That's fantastic.
I,
I also
I,
did like how you said there were a lot of references to Holmes, how Ocean played his flute at the discouragement of the neighbors when he was trying to puzzle out a case rather than the violin.
Mhm.
I'd like to see Cernunnos. I don't know if I said that right, but it's the horn one. He is widely worshipped as the Lord of Wild Things. Me and Brennan made him kind of like the. I don't know if it's super clear, but he's kind of one of the antagonists. It's just a lot of fun you could have with it. It's kind of reminds me of Pan, the Greek.
Yeah.
I think it's a Greek god, but there's one more. I don't know if I'm saying this right, but Lear or Lur, and he is the god of the sea in Ireland.
Right.
So that'd be pretty neat. What do you want people to know about Irish Gothic?
It's just it's like a culmination of my love of Irish folklore. It's something I've been wanting to do for a long time, and when I started doing these um, little collections, I thought, I really want to do some of these Irish stories because I've been wanting to do them for a long time. It wasn't like some people say, well, he's doing another seasonal collection. I mean, I think Irish Gothic will stand on its own. I don't think it has to be connected to St. Patty's Day or anything like that. And,
Right.
I actually had a story idea for a Irish story linked to Fair County that I didn't do because the first 2 or 3 pages took place in Ireland and the rest took in America, in a ship on the way to America and all that, where Saint Patrick has driven the snakes out of Ireland, and this black magic, this guy who specializes in black magic takes a hold full of snakes back to America, and they slowly become turned into snake critters. So that was something I toyed around with, and then I almost got to the end of the deadline to get the story collection in, and I didn't put it in because it just wasn't Irish enough. So, um, but I think people will get it's a little something different for me. I think I do a pretty good job at writing an Irish story. So, and I mean, a lot of people, there's a lot of like the Flanagan's Bride is a banshee story, and you know, it's almost it has the feeling of a ghost story kind of. So, um, yeah, check it out if you interested in Irish folklore or Ireland in general.
Nice. Brennan, anything else on this particular book?
Yeah, I mentioned, that you had some cryptids in there that I think people are relatively unfamiliar with, but you said, you've got a banshee story, you've got the werewolf story, you've got a leprechaun thrown in there. Um, what what is your favorite Irish cryptid? Or what was the most fun to write, work into a story?
Probably the banshee. And let's see. Um, I like the vampire story a lot, and probably Diebel's timepiece. I really that was kind of a play on Catholicism and the devil, and having this clock from hell that was stolen from hell, and he's trying to get it. The devil's trying to get back and all that. So, I mean, a lot of there was several stories that wasn't strictly Irish, but I put them in Irish settings, and it played pretty well. So
Well, and there's so many of those. There were the I think you call them the deer do.
yeah,
Um, I don't know if I'm saying that right. I've seen the same thing spelled out as the deer derg, but it's essentially witches, or is
right.
that the vampires? I can't keep them
It's the
straight. But
vampires. Yeah, they're
okay,
do.
But it's kind of that primal thing. Every mythology in the world is going to have their version of a vampire. Most mythologies in the world are going to have their version of a werewolf, and kind of taking that universal experience and just putting that Irish twist on it. I think that's completely valid. And because even though the kind of macro look at it is the same. Yes, this is a person who transforms into a wolf. Yes, this is a person who sucks blood. But there's the little details that kind of make it specifically okay. But this is what makes it the deer do, or this is what makes it. I can't remember what the Irish werewolf is called. I think it's like Faodlah or something, but I'm sure it's pronounced differently than it looks. But I love that aspect of mythology, that and with the combine that with how long these stories have been around and the commonalities shared from very different places all around the world. It almost kind of puts a universal truth behind it.
That they were once werewolves.
Yeah, why not?
And there could be.
Actually,
I don't know everything.
Actually, I wrote Arget Befair when we put Undertaker's Moon out. Thunderstorm put it out. I was putting a brand new novella, with each book, that was connected to the book. So I wanted to do a prequel novella of for Undertaker's Moon, where the origins of. So it's probably better to read Undertaker's Moon first and then read the Arget Befair, because Arget Befair's got a lot of spoilers in it as far as what happens in Undertaker's Moon. So maybe I should put a disclaimer on stuff like that. Yeah, but as far as like Blood Kin, I've got a prequel novella for that goes with that. So when the paperback of Blood Kin comes out, there's going to be a story called The Wanderer of Twilight Mountain, and that's like the origin story of Grandpappy Craven and how he become a vampire.
I gotta read that. Anything else on this Irish book or Undertaker's Moon there, fellas? If not, I know where we should go next. Okay, so let's go back to when we talked about James Newman, Midnight Rain, Brian Keene's The Rising. Why those two? Did you always... You stopped writing for 10 years, from 96, which was the closure of Zebra, to 2006. Why did you stop writing? Why did you... God, I can't talk. Hold up, I gotta write the time down. I know what I want to ask. My brain keeps saying something different than what my mouth is doing.
You just survived the work week, man. You got scrambled eggs up there right now.
Yeah, I was telling Brennan that I got to go back into work tomorrow. So I can't wait. What were you going to say, Ron?
I said, I'm right there with you. I got up at 3:30 this morning, so I'm ready to go to bed.
My goodness. Yeah. Okay. Were you reading throughout the whole period of your 10-year hiatus from writing? Can't say that word. Yikes.
No, I stopped writing horror and I stopped reading horror. I mean, I just put the whole thing on the back burner. I mean, not even on the back burner. I thought it was gone for good. So, the thing was that I had a friend a fan that became a friend about Time of Fear, and we hung out a lot, and when I stopped writing, he kept wanting me to get back into the genre again, and I told him I wasn't interested. And he would go to conventions, and he became a moderator on King's message board. When Brian had a message board, and he came back from a convention with a big stack of books and said, "Here, I brought you these books," and they were all signed by King and Newman and all that, and I said, "Oh, okay, thanks," and I put them on a bookshelf and kind of forgot about them. And then people got on the message boards and everything, was asking about me and how they could get my books, and wondering if I was dead and stuff like that, and then I thought, maybe I should read something and see how things are nowadays. And I read The Rising, and then I read Neiman's Midnight Rain, and I got interested in horror again. And it kind of fired me up, and then I came out and announced that I was coming back, and just took it from there. I mean, it was just like riding a bike, just actually, I seemed to write a little better because, I don't know, I was just, maybe I needed that long hiatus to recharge my batteries. Because when I got to the end of, like Blood Kin and everything, it got to be almost like a grind. I mean, Zebra wanted, they wanted the books a certain length, and they wanted, they wanted you to have 400, 500 page books, and sometimes it was hard to stretch them out that far, and it was stressful sometimes, and it got to the point where it was almost like that when they shut down. So maybe that was it was fate, that brought that about. So the 10-year period, I really didn't, I really didn't have any desire to write, but when I came back, I was energized and ready to go again.
Now, let's, through the magic of editing, this is going to be a first time thing. Let's just hear what Brian Keene's opinion on Ron Kelly is.
Ron Kelly had asked me to do something for him, and I would drag my balls across 6 miles of broken glass for Ron Kelly.
You had something funny to tell me about that you think that spiked up some sales when you said.
Yeah, when anytime Brian says he's gonna, he drag his balls for anybody, I mean, they're gonna say, well, who's this guy that he thinks so much of? So yeah, I could see book sales spike a little bit after that episode. So and the episode where Richard Sismar, kind of talked about me for like 5 or 10 minutes, so that helped a lot too. So anytime anybody asks who I am, and then they go looking for me, that helps a lot.
I did not know that about Richard. That's awesome.
I'm almost going to kind of piggyback off Irish Gothic, so I don't know if you want to like completely splice what you did, but
it doesn't matter.
You'll figure it out. You're a brilliant editor. Just make sure you got more than 2 hours of sleep when you edit the episode. So, Ron, I'm kind of wondering. Irish Gothic is a collection of short fiction, which is something like you said you've been churning out like wild lately. Halloween season and Seasons Creepings, and now Irish Gothic. Thinking of an idea and putting it out to press 2 months later. On average, obviously, every story is different, but on average, what's your process for writing a short story right now?
Right now is I get a little germ of idea, and I really don't outline it. I don't think too much about it. Maybe I know what the ending's going to be. I just sit down and write it. Really, short fiction is my that's my medium. That's what I like to do the most. Back in the 90s, I was mostly known for novels, but before I got with Zebra, I mean, it was all short fiction and stuff. All the small press magazines and a lot of the major anthologies I was in, and like Shock Rock and Hot Blood and stuff like that, and I was mostly known as a short story writer, but that was your goal back then, was getting into mass market and doing the novels. So when I was doing the novels, I very rarely wrote short fiction, but when I came back, I got that bug to write short fiction again. So I'm kind of taking advantage of it now. So
the stories we read, are they? How closer is first draft to what we see inside those books?
Pretty much. I mean, I can churn out a short story in 2 hours.
That's what Ken said.
That's obnoxious.
Yeah,
You're just showing off.
The story I submitted for Midnight Beyond the Stars, I did it in 2 hours, and I went back and did a quick polish, and I sent it to Ken, and he took it. But that was the way it was back in the 90s, because people would contact me and say, I need a short story quick, to fill a spot, and so I'd sit down and I'd get an idea, and I'd just sit down and write it and send it off, but it has a lot to do with your confidence. It's if you do it for a long time, and you got the confidence of that you can tell a good story and tell it effective, and then you don't agonize over it, and I know new writers, like you two, you like to have people beta read a lot of your stories, and that's a good thing. That's something I didn't have back then. I didn't actually have people who could do that for you. So yeah, I mean that's but me personally, I like to just sit down and write a story and kind of do my own thing. That's why I don't collaborate with a lot of. Well, I've never collaborated with anybody, because I have my own visions for my stories and stuff, and I could probably collaborate with. I'd love to collaborate with like Lansdale or James Newman or stuff. Something like that. But
That'd be awesome.
who knows if that'll ever happen, because I got so much on my plate now. I can't hardly keep up with it as it is.
I'd say hopefully Lansdale listens to this and contacts you, but he doesn't listen to podcasts. There is this magazine from 1991 this website that Brennan introduced me to, abebooks.com, ABEBOOKS.com. Just type in the search Ronald Kelly, and it's really affordable. $10 for plus the shipping, which are things like, I don't know, $10 too, but it's worth it. It's an old magazine from 1991 called Eldritch Tales 25, a magazine of weird fantasy, volume 8, number 1, and just to name a few authors in here. So, you got Ronald Kelly, Bentley Little. Who was the other one that stuck out at me right away? I got a long list, and it's not alphabetized. There was one, oh yeah, Clive Barker is in here too, which that's a young Clive Barker at that point. There was one more. I can't find it now. It was I can't think of their name. Super famous transgender author.
Poppy Z. Bright?
That's it. Poppy Z. Bright.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, that's really cool. There's other great names in there, but I mean, you want to look back at some early stuff from guys like that, check out abebooks.com. I don't know where else they sell it, but they got a lot of neat volumes from Eldritch Tales.
Yeah, I mean, all those old small press magazines back there, Eldritch Tales, Grew, Death Ram was a good one. A lot of us short story writers back there, we'd be in 10, 12 magazines a year like that. I mean, you'd open up the table of contents and we'd all be in there. Elizabeth Massey and Bentley Little did a lot, and it was a fun time because we were all cutting our teeth together and learning the trade, and that's how you learn your trade back then. It was like the indie press is now. I mean, the anthologies and the magazines. There's not as many magazines nowadays.
Yeah.
Maybe online magazines, maybe, but this was just. I mean, there was something called Scavengers Newsletter, and it had like listings for all the small press magazines. What they wanted and how much they paid and all that. And that's how you got leads on what magazines to submit to. And that's how we did it back then.
I'd like to see a movie about that. I mean, maybe one exists, but just writers in the 90s writing horror for a living. That'd be really, really neat. Because often I hear how you scrounge around. This is actually a good segue to something we talked about off here, Ron. Is how you scrounge for food, and there was not food, but paying the bills and what have you.
Hmm.
And it's you got to get this written so you can afford something. So Brian, just so you know, Ron gave me the okay for us to talk about this.
Should hope so.
Yeah, right. Haven't fucked up on that one yet. Um, but from the time you wrote with Zebra to the break, you told me something interesting about you and your wife, and the dynamic there. So
Hmm.
take it away, sir.
Well, I got, so involved in writing for Zebra and trying to pay the bills and everything that we started drifting apart. I mean, the relationship got strained, and, we wanted to have a family, but we was living in Nashville, didn't have any health insurance. I mean, you write for a living, it's hard to have health insurance, and, I know a lot of full-time writers right now don't have any health insurance, but that's one reason that I keep a steady job, because I've got three kids and a wife. I want to make sure they're secure and taken care of. That's that's one reason when somebody comes up, I hear somebody say I can't wait to write for a living. I think just think about it for a while, because you don't want to let go of that security you know too fast. Because you things might be selling really good this month, and next month you might not sell anything at all. So, um, but yeah, I mean, you know, things were, we were in the city. We wasn't really happy where we were, because we're both country folks, and then after Zebra, it was getting close to the end of Zebra, and we decided to move back out to the country, and I mean that's where we should have been to begin with, and then Zebra, shut down, and I got a full time job. I went back to the factories, and then things, just kind of leveled out and became normal again, and we raised three kids, and everything got fine again. But yeah, I mean, Joe Lansdale told me one time. He said, it's fine to write full time, but make sure your family's taken care of first. And he was
Hmm.
right.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, hearing that because I wanted to be a full time writer since as long as I can remember. But that was when I was a kid. I didn't even think of the dynamics of a family. So it's like I bring up sometimes. You never know. This show's going to be on for years. As long as I would say it's going to be on for years to come. So it's going to be online for free. And you never know if one day, like a young kid hears that, or a young girl, 20 something year old, whatever, hears that. If I heard that when I was younger, I'd probably think about a few more things. So thank you for sharing that. It's personal, so I appreciate that. Brennan, you got to follow up with this, sir?
No, I would definitely echo that. Thank you for sharing that. And it's just, you're right. It's so important. You get, you know, um, and when I say you, I don't mean you necessarily, but a person gets caught up in their ambition in their career, whether it be their first or their second, and they want to, you want to produce the best art that you can. You want to produce the books you're capable of, and the balancing act between trying to take care of a family, between trying to build a family, nurture a family, and also create that art is so close to impossible that it might as well be. And you really just got to lean in towards family. I of course I would love to be a full-time writer, but frankly, my pipe dream at this point is I would just like to replace my second job with writing, and use my day job to uh, have a steady paycheck and health insurance. But for exactly that reason, because I know that that's what I need to do to provide for my boys and my wife. and that's learning to put that first is important.
Yeah, another thing Joe told me is you're sitting in front of the typewriter and you're worrying about how you're going to pay the electric bill or the water bill. You're not going to produce your best work. I mean, it's going to grate on your mind. You're going to worry about it. And your creativity is going to suffer. So Joe's given me a lot of advice over the years about stuff like that, and I've taken it to heart most of the time. Maybe I didn't so much when I was writing for Zebra because it was just get this book done to pay the I mean, I was to the point in Nashville when we lived in Nashville. I was paying the rent on credit cards, and that's not anything you want to do. So because you was waiting for a Zebra only paid you twice a year, every 6 months, and sometimes you were there in front of the mailbox praying that there was a check in there. So yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful notion to want to write for a living, but unless you're really got a big following, a big fan base, and you're bringing in those royalties, solid month by month, it's hard to pull off.
I'm sure. And speaking of Joe, I know he has a book. I think it's just the one with Zebra, Act of Love. Haven't read it yet. Definitely.
That was a pretty bloody, brutal book. I mean, that one
Nice.
book he did with Zebra, but.
And then I was looking at the list. It's like 140 books altogether for the horror line. And the one that got published first, Ruby Jean Jensen,
Mm-hmm.
I think she has the most books with Zebra Man, because I was looking at the dates, and my goodness, she just... How does someone write that much? It's like 4 books a year, something like that. That's crazy. You guys want to jump to upcoming projects?
Yeah. Let's see. In June, I've got a new collection with D&T Publishing. That's Dawn Shea runs that. She did the ABCs of Terror, and it's going to be called The Web of La Sanguinaire and Other Arachnid Horrors. It's all my spider stories. So there seems to be a theme going here. But I love to put these little collections together with a common theme and all that, and of course it does have like housewarming in there, my the brown recluse stories in there, and some other stories. Some are reprints, some are brand new stories that have never been published. So that's coming out in June. Then I got the paperback of Blood Cans coming out in June. We're going to put out in October. We're going to put out a new edition of Mr. Glowbones and Other Halloween Tales with a few new stories, and I'm going to do some artwork in there. I'm going to do some black and white artwork through it, which I'm going to be kind of doing some extra projects. I've got another publisher who wants to do a combination horror anthology cookbook, and they want me to do the illustrations for that. So I'll be doing that too. It's kind of in the planning stages now. So, but we got that coming out. Then in November, Thunderstorm is going to put out book 1 of Deadeye, the horror western series. I got a publisher for the paperback and the ebook, and I can't announce that yet, but it's probably somebody But so that's going to be book 1, which is called Vampires, Werewolves, and Mojo Men.
I want it.
And that's going to be the first book of a 5-book series over the next 3 years with Thunderstorm and a yet unnamed indie publisher. So then, after I get done with this first book, I'm going to get into the sequel to Fear, do that, and from there, it's probably going to be a few more little collections, and I had a collection a few years ago called After the Burn, which is a post-apocalyptic, nuclear the story collection. It had a lot of really weird stories. I mean, I've got one story where these Elvis fans show up at Graceland, and here all of a sudden an elderly Elvis comes up out of the floor, and it's kind of a dark comedy and all that. So I've been wanting to do like almost a novel based on the characters in that collection, kind of, and that'd be after the burn. It'd be After Burn Exodus. So I might do that next year. So I mean, I've got a lot of options of what I'd like to do, and over the next few years. So it's a good time for Ron Kelly fiction.
You, sir, are a machine. Speaking of Ronald Kelly fiction, why don't you tell us what you are giving away through this episode?
Yes, I have a 4-book package here that I'm going to give away. The first one will be Irish Gothic. The second will be Essential 6 stuff. The third will be Undertaker's Moon. And the fourth will be Fear.
Yeah, that's an amazing package. Essential 6 stuff is one of my favorite collections I've ever read. It's up my alley. I want to learn about more splatterpunk writers from when it was created in the 80s up to probably when it was fading out before it returned again recently. I'm talking about like the 90s, early 90s, mid 90s. I want to read more like that. I hope there's more like your work, man. Like I know Bob Pastorella of This Is Horror said that I got to check out David Chow's. They say that right, David J. Chow. Writer Scow. I don't know why I said Chow.
Scow, yeah.
David J. Scow. My apologies. Seeing Red. I hear that's excellent. And Jack Ketchum in the same type of theme, Peaceable Kingdom. I got that on my bookshelf. I definitely want to read that soon.
You need to check out Skip and Spectre, John Skip and Craig Spectre. They did Scream and a lot of other splatter. I mean, they were mainly known as the splatterpunks.
Yeah.
Skip and Spectre, David J. Scow. I mean, I saw they were at the first World Horror Convention, and they were decked out in their long black coats, stuff like that. So, everybody, that's when splatterpunk was hot, and I remember, then all the editors and stuff, of the magazines, they were wanting their splatterpunk stuff. So that's why we started writing it, to satisfy this demand that everybody had.
I heard that the older writers were pretty offended and thought it was in poor taste with horror, which it's the old man get off my porch syndrome.
Yeah, it was a state. It was, you had your quiet horror, and then you had your splatterpunk, and maybe you're in between horror, just supernatural stuff and all that. But, I mean, that's the way it is now. You got different degrees of horror, and I mean, there's room for all of it,
Yeah, absolutely. What are you currently reading?
I am almost 3/4 of the way through Haley Piper's The Worm and His Kings, which I'm loving. It's great. I'm really getting back into cosmic horror. When I read Lovecraft when I was 13, and it just kind of went over my head, and plus, being a teen growing up in a Christian household, reading about ancient gods that, wasn't very, benevolent, and, it just kind of, it was kind of a taboo thing in my house. But I've read, Mary's work, and I'm really starting to get back into the cosmic horror now.
Nice.
And after that, I'll be reading Wesley Southard's Cruel Summer, which Alex McVeigh did this cover, so I didn't know that until I actually got it. So, but something I wanted to say to people who like to collect horror and would like to have signed books. I mean, go on Twitter, go on Facebook. Contact your favorite authors and see if they sell books. Because you know, I've got this from Wes, and I got that book from Piper, and I've got some coming from uh, Laura Hightower and
Nice.
Sam. I got true crime coming from her, and yeah, I mean, a lot of authors sell copies of their books direct, and they'll personally inscribe it to you. And so that's great for collectors. I like to collect books, and I'd like if I can get them signed, that's great.
Honestly, man, and this is not even because we're talking. Fear is my most prized. I got other books signed by you, but Fear is my most prized book. I think a lot of it has to do with it's your magnum opus, but like I read it and it's in my top 5.
Thank you.
Brennan, what are you reading?
I am almost done. Probably going to wrap up tomorrow. Moon of the Crusted Snow by Wabgishig Rice. So this one it takes place on a reservation, and I don't know what the correct term is because I want to go with Native American, but it takes place in Canada. So I'm going to jump past that and try and find out the correct term. But
I think it's just like indigenous people.
okay, perfect. So it takes place on an indigenous reservation, and their power goes out and their cell phone service goes down, and they can't figure out why. And it's kind of a hinted at apocalypse, but you're looking at it only through the lens of this small isolated town, and it's going to some interesting places. But to take on a subgenre that has been done and done and done, and just take it from that small little corner, it's pretty cool. I'm enjoying it.
We'll talk privately after you finish it, but
yeah.
I know you're gonna like where it goes. I know what you like. You're gonna love it. And the crazy part, I'm almost 100% sure that this is the last book he's written, which was in 2015, and it's public information, so I feel comfortable saying this. But his sequel, he's working on it right now. I got no idea where it's going. I read it all. It's already. I have no idea where the sequel's going.
Oh, that's excellent. I'm going to finish that up tomorrow. I'm psyched to talk to him about it. And man, I hate Scott.
Yeah. I had to think about that for a minute. I thought we were talking about a person we know. Yeah, Ron, if you're interested in this is different, man. It really feels like you can say this about really any story, but this actually feels like as close to as a white boy from Massachusetts can feel being in an indigenous reservation around, a campfire or whatever, and hearing one of their stories. This sounds like something you would hear. It's excellent. Wob is an excellent writer, very awesome, down-to-earth person. We are talking with him soon. He'll be a few episodes after this. Brennan, what else are you reading? Anything else, man? I know you're usually balancing a bunch.
You know what? I'm mostly focused on that one. I'm also in the middle of Farallon Island by Russell James, I think. I don't have it in front of me right now, but it's a Silver Shamrock book coming out end of March, probably around the same time this episode is airing, and it takes place on a small island, where this kind of former tough guy, you almost get the sense that he was, involved with organized crime, kind of gives it all up, and becomes the lighthouse keeper on this pretty isolated island. And then there's demons. So I'll leave it at that.
That's pretty neat. I am finishing up probably tomorrow. Anoka by I'm covering his name. Sorry, Shane. By Shane Hawk. It's indigenous horror. which is pretty neat. You know, I actually didn't mean to do that. Have two Indigenous writers within a week of each other, recorded wise, not airing wise. And then I just got this today. It's
Yes.
Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. This is my first time reading it. Where it's coming out in episode 4, so that's May 1st. It'll come out after Ron's episode, because that show is a monthly episode. We would love to do more, but that's not going to happen anytime soon. No way. And also, I just finished Consider This by Chuck Palahniuk. It's one of my favorite books on the crafting industry. It's a book I'm going to go back to probably quite a few more times. For me, it's that book, End of the Road by Brian Keene, because there's a lot of... I love the horror genre, so as a horror writer and reader, there's stuff I feel like you got to know in it. Stephen King's on writing. It's good, but it's not my favorite. And then I know that one's mentioned a lot, and I feel like that's mentioned a lot by people that don't know about the other great books. Not a knock on him, but I mean, he can't be the master of everything, can he? And what was the last one? I think I had a fourth one. Doesn't matter. Right now, I'm reading one more book. It's Chuck Palahniuk's Haunted. It has a short story called Guts in it. If you're new to Palahniuk, this is a short story you have to read. It's fucked up. It's just out there. It is bizarre, but in such a glorious, disturbing way. Ron, where can people follow you, man?
Hey, I'm on Twitter, Ronald Kelly 4. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram under Dixie Darkin. You can find me at ronaldkelly.com. We're fixing to update the website, maybe do a new design on it, and maybe put some free fiction on it. And,
Oh, sweet.
And I have a blog that I really need to, do more for. It's called Southern Fried and Horrified, and I haven't done as much as I need to do on the blog, but because I've been so busy with other projects and stuff. But yeah, just or Google me and see what you can find. So
That'd be a neat, on a shirt, Southern Fried and Horrified. Be really cool. I'd wear that.
The little icon on top is a frying pan with some bacon and an egg that's kind of formed into a skull. So pull that up and look.
Yeah, I'd buy that.
And you know who did that design for me? It was John Horner Jacobs. Maybe.
Oh, no kidding.
Quite a few years ago we did that. So
he does this really. He's very talented beyond writing.
Actually, I kind of helped him edit his first one, Southern Gods, kind of.
Really?
Yeah, I kind of did some proofreading and did a little. I guess it was like a beta read. Actually,
that's beta reading, yeah.
So, but that was several years ago. I don't forgot how many years ago he put that out, but
I never knew that. I wish you mentioned that. That's really cool. We talked to him last year. Really nice guy, very smart. He does these lack of not knowing what the proper terminology is, etchings, and they are incredibly detailed. So let's talk real quick about Dead Headspace store. You can buy merchandise with my goofy face on it, on a t-shirt, mug, notebook, on a mask. Maybe this won't apply in a few years if you're listening to this. It's 2021 and we still wear masks around everywhere. And soon baseball caps and who knows, maybe onesies for babies.
Yeah, well, when I put on my t-shirt, my wife says, is that a monster from one of your books? And I said, no, that's just Pat. So.
If I got a lot to live up to if I ever meet you guys. Hey, it looks normal-ish. You guys have any final thoughts, any final words, comments, phrases, anything? Fantastic. So thank you, everybody, for listening to us. This has been a fun episode. I'm urging you. Buy Fear. Buy Fear right now. Read it. Ron's got to love good books. Even the 3-star one's good too. I still feel like a dick.
That's a lot, Patrick.
Well, if that's the worst that I do between you and I, then, I'm not so bad. Next week, next Monday, we have Chuck Palahniuk on. Yep, Chuck Palahniuk, the guy that wrote Fight Club, Guts, bunch of other stuff. We're really excited to talk to him. I'm going to keep it at that. Let's see what happens with that conversation. Stick around for next week. Have a good one, everyone.